How's it going, YouTube? It's your boy Optima, back with a brand new video, and today we have an exciting video upcoming as we are interviewing none other than Sirturmund. He is one of the most rising players in the Legends of Runeterra competitive community, as not only did he top 4 the Guardians of the Ancient Seasonal back in June, he's started to shift his focus since then more on the grassroots tournament scene and has really started to make his name there, as not only did he win one of the Master Runeterra qualifiers, he's gotten top 32 in 2 other ones, on top of also popularizing scouts, which I'm sure anyone who's playing a ladder right now is seeing quite a bit of. So definitely a player well worth having an interview with, just hearing a little bit from, with all his recent success, also venturing more into content creation, and just who's really putting an impression on the Legends of Runeterra competitive community. So thank you all so much for tuning into this video. I really appreciate the support. If you do end up enjoying this video, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to leave a comment. Love hearing from you guys, and I'll always try to chat a little bit back with you all. And also subscribe. 3 videos per week, as well as really exciting stuff like these interviews. So without further ado, let's get into it. Once again, appreciate you guys. Thank you for your time.
Do you want to reach your potential? It's a journey I could provide. I admire a man of appetites. Let me help you find refreshment.
Because now he gives us a chance to just kill the big guy for free. He doesn't have enough mana to kill us. What am I missing, chat? The darkness is at 3, so even if he has another Vagar, he can't win. The Stally doesn't win it either. He doesn't have enough mana.
Make the hurt your weapon.
Am I missing something? And then we just hush and we just win? That was actually kind of smart. That was kind of smart of the opponent.
So now I'm here with Sirturmund. How's it going, Sirturmund?
It's going well. Just, been a long day of streaming and YouTube content, so a lot of competitive Runeterra here in the next few months.
Awesome. That's great to hear, honestly, and I'm glad you're kind of like enjoying the game enough to want to put that time into the game. But yeah, I think we should actually take a little bit of a step back and let's actually go into the Runeterra history. Let's revisit your past. In general, just tell us a little bit about yourself as a person, if you don't mind just sharing a little about your history with like video gaming, how you got to this point with Legends of Runeterra. That'd be really awesome.
Yeah, so I always been more of a fan of like strategy games rather than like shooters or like action type of games. So this started way back when I was like in middle school. So I used to play like this game called Wizard 101, which was like a card game MMO. And I played that for a couple of years, and obviously then I went to high school, got busy, etc. But throughout high school, I got exposed to like Yu-Gi-Oh! So that was kind of like one of my first experiences through like one of the actual physical TCG games. A lot of my friends played Yu-Gi-Oh, so I used to play with them all the time. And then after that, obviously, once I went to college, I kind of focused more on my engineering degree. So I'm an engineer by my degree. And once I graduated back in 2018, I didn't really have a ton of things, like a ton of video games that I wanted to play at the time. So I started playing a lot of League of Legends. And from League of Legends, I ended up finding out about TFT this summer of 2019. Played a little bit of TFT. And then right away on the fall of 2019, when they announced Legends of Runeterra, I had those big preview patches in November, I believe it was. Right away, I got hooked. So as soon as the game came out in January, it was that was it. I started playing it right from the start.
All right, dang, that is yeah, that's quite the history.
Yeah,
I actually also fell in love with card gaming with Yu-Gi-Oh. I would say that was like the first game that was like, okay, cards are really fun when you can like present them in this way, and
yeah,
so yeah, I definitely resonate with that. And then yeah, that's cool that you stuck with the interest within the strategy kind of realm of video gaming for the longest, and then you found your way to LOR, and obviously you had the past with other Riot games, so it's cool that that allowed
yeah.
you to already be hip as soon as the game was getting revealed. Because I actually had no clue myself. I had to stumble upon it in like the wildest way, so that's cool that you were able to just get on it early on. And yeah, that probably helped you to some of that current success and previous success that you're seeing since you've been with the game since its baby days when it was an infant.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
yeah,
funny because I played that whole year of 2020,
yeah,
and I really didn't play a many. I don't really didn't play any tournaments at all. So
yeah,
it wasn't until recently in 2021 with the seasonal tournaments that I really started getting involved with the competitive scene.
yeah.
Before that, all I used to do was just watch Twitch streams and reach masters every season and just call it a day. So
Hey, dang, just having success, but not even like able to really show it within the
right,
community. But now you're definitely doing that, so it's never too late to get to that stuff. So, anyways, we'll get to that though. So yeah, we know that you started at the beginning with Legends of Runeterra. Tell us a little bit about that time. The game was a little bit more bare bones. How have you seen the game grow into what it is now, and has it been positive in your opinion for the most part? Tell us a little bit about that time from the beginning to now. Now that Legends of Runeterra does have a little bit of a history to look back on.
yeah, I think the benefit for me is that even though I did play Yu-Gi-Oh, it was more like friendly kind of format. I never really went into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh that much because I was just playing with my friends in high school. So Legends of Runeterra was really my first dive into like a super competitive card game. I never played like Magic. I never played Hearthstone. So for me, everything was new, and I think that's the benefit that I had compared to a lot of other players that they come into Legends of Runeterra and they're already comparing like the mechanics with Magic and mechanics with Hearthstone or with Yu-Gi-Oh. For me, everything was new and fresh, and it has been that way for the past 2 years now. Where every time like a new car, new mechanic to me is like completely new, completely fresh, and I'm just super excited to like try it out and kind of see how it works. I think there's only been like a very few times where I've been bored of the game. Aside from that, I have probably put way too many hours into this game in the past 2 years.
Hey, but you love to see it, man. Everyone has their hobbies. Some people binge watch on Netflix. Some people
Yeah.
go to the gym and work out every chance they get. We like playing card games, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that's awesome to see. And yeah, I'm kind of similar. I would say I got somewhat like more into the competitive mentality when I would approach Yu-Gi-Oh, but I never played in any
Mhm.
Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments at all. So I can't really say I got that deep into anything competitive with that game, and that was definitely the other card game I went the furthest with, some duel masters, but nothing too crazy there. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's very similar actually for me, in that sense that things felt very fresh as far as approaching it in such a competitive, very strategic, very like mentally challenging way that Runeterra at its highest peak of competitive really gives you. And that's fun. That is a feeling that is very, it's something you could start craving, like, oh, this is challenging me
Yeah.
mentally, and this is in a fun, challenging way. And yeah, I didn't start at your time with the game. Do you think like patches, new champions, expansions? How have you enjoyed the way the game's grown? Have you really liked every piece of it? Was there some things that kind of rubbed you a little wrong? Where do you stand with that?
Yeah. So funny enough, the one time I took a break from Runeterra, and it was like about a month. Was right around the patch where TK Raka got released. So I thought the deck was like super boring, and it was like ruined. It was like all over the meta, and it was just so like such a slog to play against. And I actually hated the deck. So that was like the only time that I thought that the game was like not fun for me. But then every time after that, it's been like really super fun. I feel like Riot has done a really good job of bringing new strategies or doing a variety of decks. And the craziest thing is that this past like 2 months, or it has really been some of the most variety of decks that you've seen in ladder and tournaments, right? So it seems like as the years go by and more cards get released, things are getting even better and better in terms of like diversity in the meta and stuff like that. But what I really, really love about the game is that because I was here from the start, it feels like everybody has been growing together with the game. Like if you took a player from today and dropped them back in 2020 in the beginning of LOR, that player would like dominate every single tournament. Because to be honest, all of us sucked back then during the beta and the first season. So kind of seeing that growth of not just the game, but seeing the players becoming better strategy wise and just becoming better decision making skills has been like very impressive. And that I've been a part of that has been really good too.
Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed seeing that. I actually noticed you starting to become a really solid player, and we'll get a little bit more into that as well. And we'll touch on that TK Rocka point because that's actually really funny that that was the time frame in which you decided to take a little break from the game. But yeah, overall, I would say that's true. The one thing I would just want to say to touch on that point you said with like more cards is making the game more open. I would say the large balance patches are helping with that though. Having those changes to some of the more unfortunate just cards that did turn out to be a little bit more impressive than
Yeah.
the devs thought it would be, and that's just expected. Like they can only test a card and test matchups so much. So when something is just a little overpowered, having those big balance patches does really help. And we obviously recently had one on January 5th, and yeah, we're experiencing one of the best metas because of that in this Magic Misadventures expansion. So yeah, I would definitely agree. The meta's really solid right now. And yeah, you love to see it as the game's like in a later point compared to this being early on. But just so we can get through everything, I do want to transition. So let's transition a little bit into you becoming more of a successful Legends of Runeterra player. Did you make Masters your first season when you played the game? And if so, yeah, because you said everyone wasn't that good at the game. When did you start to feel yourself like? When did you become confident in yourself as a player? I also want to hear just a little bit of your thoughts as your mental and actual like on paper like results growth as a player happened.
The Blade Dance, the Flawless Duet is going to come down. This is going to summon a casual 6-white attack with Aurelia being able to swap in wherever she pleases. And that's just going to be it for What Am I? I mean, the star shaping is just not enough here.
Yeah, he had to be able to go an additional wider than this if he was going to live, and he just couldn't do it. Actually, two wider, 3 wider. Wow, I mean, just
That's
crazy.
18
The
attack
fact
is
that
here.
it's just all coming through. And Sirturmund, we were about ready to count him out with the running out of steam. His hand was pretty bricked, but it was just the perfect card after perfect card after perfect card. And Sirturmund at the top of the day talking about wanting to be a name that everyone knows and is afraid of when they see him on the ladder is one step closer to making that reality, as he is now the next player that is qualified for Worlds with that 2-0 performance over What Am I?
So I did make to Masters that beta season. Actually, it took me a month after the game's release, so I think I made it like right away in February. Probably was one of the first 1,000 players to make it to Masters. To be honest,
That's
I was
awesome.
using the Hecarim deck that was terrorizing the meta back in
Oh
the day.
yes, I've heard.
So as to when I started feeling that I think I really it's funny because I mean obviously I became more well known after my top first seasonal finish last summer using a Aurelia, TK Rack, and Trolls. But I didn't feel like I was a great player back then yet. Like I think I was still using decks, especially like Aurelia, that was like really over the top in strength wise. I think recently, more than anything, this past month is when I felt like I have really kind of started pushing those boundaries. So, participating in the Master and Runeterra qualifiers has been a really good experience, and I think I've been missing out a lot by not participating on those community tournaments often in the past. I think I could have learned a lot as a player back then, and probably had more success than had success earlier than when I did it last summer. So. I guess it's one of my regrets that I didn't participate enough in community tournaments, but I'm glad that I am now because honestly, all those best of threes tournament meta is completely different than ladder, and it's one of the things that I love the most about Runeterra. The best of three is just amazing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that myself. Is that it makes sense as to why you started to see more success, start to feel more confident as a player as you start to be able to enter more events and really see where you truly stack up against these players. Because yeah, you can play someone on ladder, but when they're playing a deck that you can actually ban and you're playing a deck that they can ban, that really forces you to have a more versed amount of skill set on these different decks that all have different strategies, rather than being able to pilot one specific deck to high like rankings. And you even alluded to decks like Azir Aurelia. We saw it with TF Fizz. These were decks that not everyone was piloting to success, but the average, like more players than you would want were having really solid results with these decks. And that's where it's like, okay, how much is it the deck than the results? And clearly you've shown a lot recently, and even I would say even then, being able to make it to top 4 in seasonals, let's not downplay that. That is amazing. I know so many people wish they could do that, so yeah, let's not downplay that. But it definitely makes sense that getting your feet more wet in the tournament scene is when you start to be like, okay, now I'm understanding this. Now I'm like getting my lineup set. Like, yeah, I'm rocking out with this, and that's awesome to hear. The community tournament scene just has really been blowing up with Runeterra Academy hosting events. Now we do have the Master Runeterra qualifiers that is still ongoing, and then we even have other community tournaments happen all the time. Lots happening, and it makes sense why players are also progressing so well. We're seeing a lot of new names pop up and getting pretty good results, and yeah, that's the stuff you want to see. So yeah, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about that more recent success. So we know that you did well in a Master Runeterra qualifier to secure your spot in that actual grand finale, and I know you've just been having success on ladder as well. Tell us a little bit about your recent success. What do you think's really pushed you as far as like what's your preparation? I want to hear a little bit about that. What's your preparation when it comes to preparing for a tournament? What is that like, and how do you feel well prepared for a tournament? It just mentally, like what makes you feel confident in your lineup, and how exactly you plan to navigate it. I would love to hear a little bit more insight on that, and then also just how have you felt about your recent success, and where do you think the limit is?
Yeah, so I'm very data driven.
Yeah.
So one thing that I love doing is looking at all the mobalytics data, all the Runeterra AR, etc. All the different sites that we have that give you matchup tables and matchup data.
Yeah.
So that's usually where I start. I'm looking at the matchup tables, and then I'm kind of looking at like what people are playing in ladder, what people are playing in tournaments the week before and the week leading to that, and trying to figure out what the most popular decks are, what the strongest decks are, and trying to create a lineup that can at least try to target or soft target some of those more popular or strong decks.
Yeah.
And kind of that's the way that I went about it. So on the Master Runeterra qualifier number 2, which is the one that I won,
Yes.
that's kind of how I ended up setting it up, right? So I went with a lineup of TK Raka, Lee Sin, and Bando Tree. And the whole point of my lineup is that I was going to counter GP Sejuani, which at the time was one of the strongest deck. And the lineup could also soft target Lee Sin decks, right? Because TK Raka and Bando Tree both do good versus Lee Sin, and then you have the Lee Sin mirror. So I kind of do it that way, where you're like hard targeting one or two decks, soft targeting the other few, and then you know which ones you need to ban. And that ended up being proving successful, where I ended up kind of winning all my matchups. And even the very key thing that I found out about tournaments is that the way that you win tournaments, no matter which lineup you bring, no matter what tournament it is, at some point you're gonna have to win at least one favorable matchup. And in that tournament, it happened to be in the semifinals, where I was able to beat Darkness with my Lee Sin, which is, normally a very bad matchup. So you have to be comfortable both winning the matchups that you're favorable in, but you also have to not give up when you queue up into an opponent that has 3 decks that completely counter your decks, because you're gonna have to get through it sometimes. And on that seasonal that I made top 4, on the open rounds, I won 2 matches where like literally I won TK Raka versus Ash Naxos that had 2 Scorched Earths. Like, how does that happen? So you need to win some of the matchups like that sometimes. So that's kind of one of my biggest advice. Just don't be afraid of those bad matchups, and just try to predict what people are bringing as you create your lineups.
Yeah, I I feel like that's a strategy that not everyone can actually do themselves, though. Some people just have to come with the best decks and pray that they can win through the strengths of the best decks, because I think that's also a fair strategy. What decks
Yeah.
have shown to be the best on ladder and just bring those, because trying to play counter decks can actually be difficult for some, and I would say at times it can be harder. TK Raka has never been known as like the meta destroyer, but it has been known as a solid deck to bring in tournaments at times and be able to counter certain decks that are especially ill prepared for it, because it's kind of a surprise pick because it's never really consistently seen on ladder. So yeah, I would say though it could be a little difficult. So not everyone can actually achieve that to the same way. But it's funny, I actually interviewed another player who I feel has a similar mentality to the game as you in Hipster Waldo. And Hipster Waldo obviously won a EU seasonal, and he was notorious for winning that with TK Raka, and he had scouts in his lineup during that seasonal as well, and that propelled him to a win, I think, against TLC at the time, Trundle Lysandra Control.
That makes sense.
And yeah, it's just, yeah, it's interesting how you two were able to make that work. But that is a success story that's been kind of unique to you guys, and not a lot of other players have really, especially TK Raka, have shown the same prowess as you two consistently with that deck. And I just want to commend you for, I think, how skillful you have to be at those decks, especially to win them into unfavored matchups. Because, yeah, the best meta beaters in any meta, like, if AK Ari Kinnan was to beat a bad matchup, I think that wouldn't really surprise too many people. But when you see a deck like TK Raka winning a bad matchup, that's pretty surprising. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was gonna say, I think one thing that's important, and I think a lot of competitive players do this, and I think that's why some content creators also tend to do really well in tournaments, is because they play a really huge number of decks, right?
Yeah.
So even though I didn't start doing content until recently, one of the things that I always done is I always hit Masters with a different deck every season. So I force myself to not repeat the same deck twice if I really hit Masters with it, and I have 2 Masters accounts. So, you know, if you make the math, every season I'm doing at least 2 different decks and I'm taking to Master. That has allowed me to learn a lot of different decks, from aggro to mid-range to control to combo, where I'm able to pick up any of these decks really quickly. Obviously, you still need some practice on them, but while some players might take them like 50 games to master a deck, it might take me 10 or a little bit more, right? And I think that is very important because he allows me to be able to bring decks like that I feel like can counter the current meta. So I recommend people not to get stuck like one tricking something. Like, as much as people know me for TK Raka, I don't really play TK Raka much at all, except for tournaments, right? So
Yeah.
just kind of open your horizons there on what you can play.
Yeah, and I would actually even further that point by just saying why that also matters so much too is for knowing how your opponent's deck actually works.
Oh, yes.
If you're
yes.
playing all these different strategies, you're going to have a much better idea of what your opponent's trying to do and what they're trying to set up, because you played that deck. And yeah, sometimes we could get so like bent on, oh, I don't like that strategy, I'm not playing it. But yeah, the fact that you're open to that really diversifies your skill set as a piloter of your own deck, but also as a just your knowledge of other decks as well. So yeah, definitely a skill not worth talking down on. Let's move on a little bit though. Let's talk a little bit more about those specific decks that have worked out for you in tournaments. And right now, the hot one, I even saw we got Emotional, a very decent size. He wants to call himself a mid-sized creator, but Emotional, he has this Monday like meta report where he kind of talks about where the meta shifts, and he was saying how you climb so much LP with that Scouts deck and really have popularized it, and now we're seeing that a bunch in tournament lineups. People are trying to target this deck now. Give us a little bit of details on why you decided to start piloting Scouts and just why it was finding success and how you feel about the deck in the current meta.
Yeah, so funny story about that. So this was like, I guess, last week on Wednesday that this happened. I woke up, you know, I went to work. I work from home, so I just went to my other room to work.
Yeah.
Nothing really was happening at work, so I started playing some Runeterra. And at this point, I'm still like 300 LP, trying to get to that 7-2 tiebreaker. I was playing Nightfall, started losing a bunch. switched to TK Raka, ended up winning a bit, and then started losing again, and got down to like 250 LP. And then I was like, you know what? I'm tired of going against all these control decks and Harry Cannon. Let me just play scouts. So literally on the spot, I just made the list. I was like, I just want this, this, this. I always thought Stony Suppressor was a little bit of a bait, so I didn't want to have that card. So I kind of went more like a aggro wide mindset. I literally made the deck in like 5 minutes because Scouts, I mean, he's been around for a while, so the deck is essentially pretty similar.
Yeah.
And I just started playing, and I started winning and winning and winning. And by the end of the day, I think it was like 4 o'clock. So literally, like by the end of my workday, I was like 538 LP. So I was like, oh, wow. I get like 300 LP in like, less than like 6 hours.
Wow.
So that's kind of where that happened. And now it's crazy because I've seen that deck being like one of the best Scouts versions on Mevalytic there and other stuff like that. I think it has like over 200 something games while still holding like a 64% win rate like that. It's at same deck list. And it's the first time that a deck that I made gets to that point. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a deck builder. I tend to just join lists from other players that are much better deck builders than me. So the fact that I was able to do that on like 10 minutes and then climb like that and now it's blown up like this was crazy.
Wow. Wow. No, you love to see it. I feel like that's honestly, I'm not even going to lie, it's an aspiration of mine to eventually be in your shoes because I think that's one of the coolest things. Deck building for me is one of the most fun things in Legends of Runeterra. I actually really enjoy it, but obviously making a really solid competitive deck that really works in the meta it's enormously hard. It's not the easiest thing to do at all, and especially then for others to be able to pilot to success is even further hard to accomplish. So yeah, just lots of props for that. And yeah, I'm seeing nothing but people having success, and even others saying like, oh, all I'm facing is Scouts right now. And even myself, I started like going back to the drawing board because I actually don't like the current decks in the meta that beat Scouts. I'm like, I need to see what else there is out there because I'm not liking these current decks that beat Scouts because then they lose to X, Y, Z. So yeah. Definitely a really strong deck. Your version is super solid, and it has a huge place in the meta, and it should be interesting as we head into the rest of the Master Runeterra series as well as the seasonals to see how that deck progresses going into that. But before we talk too much about that, I also wanted to talk to you just a little bit about TK Raka because in the most recent Master Runeterra qualifier, you still made top 32 and you were rocking out with TK Raka in your lineup. But obviously, top 32, I know your aspirations kind of consistently stay pretty high in that top 4 area, top 8 at least. So how are you feeling about TK Raka as opposed to decks like Scouts? Like, how are you feeling? What's TK Raka's place in the meta right now?
Well, so that's the secret that people are not going to tell you. Scouts has, in my opinion, a good matchup against. TK Raka has a good matchup into Scouts, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So the reason that I brought TK Raka this weekend is because I wanted to bring, again, like I was talking about earlier, something that kind of hard targets and kind of soft targets. So my lineup of Scouts, TK Raka, and Cillian Seraph was meant to kind of soft target Scouts while also hard targeting stuff like Darkness, Lee Sin, and FTR, which all 3 decks should be able to easily beat. So that thing is why I ended up having success. Unfortunately, I actually ended up losing both games with TK Raka on that top 32 matchup. The second game against Anivia, I ended up making like a really dumb misplay that ended up costing me the game, which kind of shows you that no matter how much expertise you have in a certain deck, there are still chances for you to misplay or to kind of play too quick and not see like the way that you can win the game. So you have to always kind of think your move throughs and just don't play so fast. Just kind of play it slow. Think about the stuff you need to do, especially in a tournament, right? But I do think that TK Raka is very well positioned still in the meta because you still have those Darkness, those FTRs, Scouts now. The bad thing is that it does really bad against Ari Cannon, right? So you kind of have to always ban Ari Cannon, and everybody's bringing Ari Cannon. So that's like the only reason why TK Raka might not be that awesome. He also does really good versus Trolls, by the way, and obviously Lee Sin that people are still playing.
Yeah. And that's like, Can we really blame it for losing to Ari Cannon? Like, we all
Yeah.
know that deck is a menace by now, so losing to it's understandable. But no, at the end of the day, yeah, having to auto ban isn't ideal. You'd want a little bit more wiggle room and not feel too scared of a matchup. So yeah, I can see that being a little bit troublesome. But nevertheless, that's definitely cool. You always seem to do your homework and have some really solid insight as far as like why you're bringing a deck and what exactly you're targeting. So it's definitely cool being able to kind of pick your brain and hear those thoughts. Let's kind of hear more about the future now. Obviously, in the very near future, we're going to have that last, this actual weekend, we're going to have the last Master Runeterra qualifier. It's going to be number 6. People just grabbing some last minute points there. Obviously, you have already qualified for the grand finale tournament, but obviously, you may still want a strong showing and to just shore up your skills going into that. And then the weekend after the grand finale tournament, which is going to be obviously the weekend after this weekend, we're going to actually have our next seasonal. And that should also be so interesting with how diverse this meta is. So I'm just curious to hear from you. How are you feeling going into these like big tournaments like that are coming up soon? Are you feeling a little pressure to play the game a bunch, to be sharp on your skills? Or are you feeling like, hey, I've kind of proven I'm in a good spot here. I'm just kind of waiting it out and ready for them to show up?
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of chilling right now.
Yeah.
So again, because I made it to like 535 LP, I think it's a good spot for me to camp.
Okay.
So I'm not actively playing like super competitive rank ladder. I'm still playing on my EU account on my Smurf, but I'm just playing there, making my content for my YouTube channel,
Yeah.
right? So I'm trying like different decks every day, which is not really as competitive as what you can be. So really, the only practice that I'm gonna be this Master Runeterra tournaments leading up to the seasonal. Because as much as I think the Master Runeterra tournaments have been amazing, really all that matters is that seasonal, right? That seasonal top 32 and hopefully making it to number 1 or number 2 gives you so much exposure and obviously a lot more money than any other tournament that we have right now. So
Yeah.
leading up to that, just gonna keep trying to do well in these tournaments, right? So I mean, I came first, I come top 8, top 16, and top 32 in the 4 that I participated in. So maybe in this one on Sunday, I come top 4 or number 2, to try to complete the whole cycle. So we'll see how that goes. I think for now, it's just trying different lineups and kind of seeing from there. I think we still have so much time left that the meta is going to completely shift. So we still have, 2.5 weeks for the seasonal. So
Yep.
I expect it to be completely different than we are right now. I mean, look at Scouts, right? Came out of nowhere in the last week. I expect another deck or two to do the same thing in the next 2 weeks. And then everybody's going to be like, we got to ban this or we got to target this. So
Yeah.
tell what I'm going to bring too early.
Yeah, the meta, it's crazy. That's honestly one of the most fun, but also maybe at times the most aggravating thing about card games is how quickly the meta shifts. So if you take a couple of weeks off, you're not going to know like what's changed, what's going on. You definitely have to stay on top of things to really know what deck's showing up and really what to expect, especially in a tournament as big as seasonals. So playing on ladder should still give you that insight to know what's going around, and that should put you in a decent place. I know that our team ISO will definitely be also hiking up in our scrimmaging together so that we can also help each other prepare, as we have plenty of players on the team with some high aspirations from the upcoming seasonals, especially like even looking at maybe next time. He's having a great couple of tournaments recently, and he's going to be a great player to look out for in that seasonal. I definitely wish you the best of luck, and I think you're going to have another solid with you actually putting this extra time into tournaments. I think you'll do well, but definitely don't want to add any pressure onto you, even though I know you seem pretty calm, cool, and collected. But yeah, let's just finish off with one last statement on the state of the game right now, and what do you want to see from like the next expansion? And then you're making content. I assume you're really enjoying the game right now. If you could just talk a little about that, and then of course you could plug your channel and anything else you want to plug. And you should also shout out a player whose decks that you net deck. I want to hear who's the main net deck for Sirturmund. That would be a good one to hear.
Yeah. So in terms of state of the game, like I'm really liking the game right now because it has a lot of variety. So as strong as Ari Cannon is, I feel like it's not as oppressive as some of the top decks of previous metas were, right? So I'm thinking like a Sierrelia or even TLC back in early 2020 or Fizz TF or Gohar back when Gohar was 1 mana. Pack Your Bag was 1 mana, sorry. It is annoying. It's an annoying deck, and it's a very strong deck, and you're still gonna see it in everybody's lineup. But it's not like it doesn't feel really bad to play against, if that makes sense. I feel like the opponent still needs to think about it and cannot just slam all their units and just boom, 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 win the game. So because of that, I really like it. And in addition to that, it feels like there's so like every single type of deck can be playable. So there's aggro decks running around out there. There's combo decks, there's control decks, as you can see with FTR and Darkness kind of shaping up a lot of the meta. There's some mid-range decks out there with like Shyvana, Pantheon, etc. So you kind of have something that everybody can enjoy, and it's very rare when you get that like in a card game. Usually you either have aggro running amok or you have control running amok, but not usually a space where all four of them are kind of in the same place, right? So I've really been enjoying it, and because of that, I have started making. I just made like my new YouTube channel. So YouTube, Sirturmund LOR, and I'm trying to post videos every day. And because the meta is so diverse, I'm able to post like a different deck every single day where I can showcase some gameplay on different decks out there. So it's been really fun so far. Obviously, a lot of work, but it gives me a lot of practice, and it is a game that I can really enjoy. And in terms of who I steal my decks from, it's a trick question because the real answer is that what I do is that I go to Mobalytics, I filter by like Master Diamond. I can tell you exactly my filters. It's like Master Diamond. Then I like take out the filter that like limits the decks to only be like so that it can be any deck that has 20 match or more, and then just sort by win rate. And usually, you can see like the past day or three of games, and from there I kind of pick like, oh, this deck looks interesting, let's try it out, and then I start tweaking it as I go through it. But in the past, one person that I have followed a lot has been 4LW. I know he just recently came back, and he just came second in the most recent Master Runeterra tournament. But he was a player that I used to follow a lot back in early 2020. So hopefully he starts putting some nice deck lists here soon as well that I can copy.
Yeah, no. That's actually a great player to net deck. 4OW actually he even like builds decks full on himself, rather than just like taking someone else's idea and retooling it. Like he'll start from like ground, like the foundation level, and figure it all out. I saw that he's kind of popularized the P&Z Shadow Isles kind of Kindred version deck, where it's like Kindred, Elise, and then like a one of Vi or Ezreal. He's sticking with the Ezreal. I see a lot of other people on Vi, but he's sticking with the Ezreal. But yeah, he's making it work clearly by that high finish in the Master Runeterra qualifier, and he also finished in the top 8 of the most recent Runeterra Life tournament that was dominated by the EU community. But he was a part of that domination. So yeah, definitely a really strong player to be working off of, and he seems to be enjoying those more control lineups. So yeah, just emphasizing your point about all these different strategies, especially in the tournament meta, being alive and definitely viable. And yeah, you love to see it. This is definitely a golden time. So anyone questioning should they play Legends of Runeterra, this is the time to play it. Right now is super solid as far as being able to play whatever you really feel. And yeah, I just like super agree with all your points that even though I would say Ari Kinnan is probably a notch above most of the other decks, it doesn't feel as oppressive as past decks. And on top of that, because everything else is so... Ooh, I'm so sorry. I knocked over my bottle. But just because everything else is so, like, the gap between Tier 2 and Tier 1, that was, like, the main thing I heard. Shane from the Twin Suns podcast actually said this, that it feels like the gap between Tier 2 and Tier 1 decks is not as wide as it has been in the past. And I thought that was a really well way of kind of summing up this meta. So, yeah, I definitely agree with all the sentiments that you just put out there. And, yeah, I wish you nothing but success. We do even have it on the screen, Sirturmund LLR, so definitely follow him on Twitter. This guy is posting if he's making a new deck, you definitely want to be there to check it out. So follow him on Twitter and also follow him on YouTube. Pretty consistent content going up there, and we know he's going to hold himself to a high standard with the stuff he puts out there. So you guys definitely want to check that out as well. He is a part of a competitive team that we have at Runeterra Life, and we definitely plan on trying to get involved in some things like Runeterra Academy. So really strong player that you definitely want to watch out for in this upcoming seasonal as well. And yeah, I can't wait to just see what else you're able to accomplish in the near future, man. Really happy to have you on this call with me. Once again, everyone, support him, support the channel as well. And this is the Runeterra Roundtable podcast presented by Runeterra Life. And Runeterra Life is actually, I can officially announce it now, we are starting a weekly tournament series. It's going to be called the Runeterra Life Rumbles on Thursday evenings. It's going to be starting at about 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just to give everyone time to get home on that NA server. Unfortunately, we won't be able to support the other servers as of right now, but we're starting a weekly tournament series as well, so you definitely want to check out Runeterra Life. Links in the description to Sirturmund, to myself, and then also to Runeterra Life, so you guys can check out the stuff that we're going to have going on in the near future, as that's just one of a few announcements that we should hopefully have soon. So thank you for your time. You have a wonderful rest of your night, Sirturmund, and thank you to everyone watching. You guys mean the world to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you.